They like do not care that you guys are here because they're habituated. They're used to human presence. It's just another chimp family nearby, and that's sort of when the alpha started sending like the chimps down, the other chimps, and we like followed them around for a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was more concerned with which side I was going to pick.
Okay.
You know?
Hello and welcome to the Worldwide Honeymoon Travel Podcast, the podcast that talks about all things couples travel, including destinations, tips, advice, and more. I'm Kat.
I'm Chris.
And this is episode number 188.
And a very special welcome back to your voice.
Yay! It's starting to come back. Yeah, I mean...
It's no more Mike Wazowski.
Stop it. It was way worse when I got home from France. And I remember that weekend, I was like, I don't know when we're going to record because my voice needs to slightly be intelligible or understandable.
Do you remember those old, like, I feel like they were on like MTV and like VH1 back in the day? Do you remember those old, like, don't do drugs commercials?
I believe so.
Your voice would have been perfect for one of those. Like the effects of cigarettes.
Okay. Well, I'm slowly getting better from my upper respiratory infection, double ear infection that I had when I got home.
Yeah.
It was rough.
It's tough though. Like, I mean, if you're like, yeah, if you're exposed to stuff that you're not often exposed to, it's, you know.
Well, it's tough too because I have noticed a pattern that when we're traveling for a long period of time, it's easier to get sick. Because I've gotten sick after trips before. Like, I mean, I've been traveling for almost a month. Or, you know, it felt like it, like a good chunk of time. Because we got back from Africa. We were only home for a few days. Then we went back home to Kentucky for a wedding. Then I was home for a week. And then left for France for 10 days. And I was doing a lot in France. And I was kind of going quite a bit there just to get content on the blog or for France Voyager and stuff. And yeah, it makes sense that by the end of it, I was just pretty worn down.
Yeah.
That I got sick. It doesn't help that like, this was so frustrating, but so many people were like not covering their coughs and they were just like hacking into the air just in public on the train. And you're like, why are you doing this? Cover your mouth. Have we learned nothing in the last couple of years?
That would bother me. Like, not necessarily outside a lot, because I will be honest, when I am running, if I have to cough, I don't vampire it.
Well, no, I think that's fine when when you're outside. If you're in a crowded area outside, definitely cover up. Or when you're on like public transportation, or wear a mask if you don't feel well. Isn't that something we've learned? Like, just wear a mask if you feel sick because nobody really wants your germs. COVID or not, we don't want your germs. Like, nobody wants to share germs.
Wow.
Well, they don't. Like,
that's coming out hot.
It's frustrating when it's like, people are just coughing and hacking into the air and they're not wearing a mask. And it's just like, I know you probably just have a normal cold, but like, I don't want that. Like, it's still miserable to have a cold.
Yeah, I wouldn't be thrilled about people doing that. Like, whether it's like a plane or a train or any other like other confined environment. Mm-hmm. Do you know any curse words in French?
Yes.
Do you use them?
Sometimes.
What situations?
Like, you know how you'd use like the F word or something? You can use, there's like
how you do it here when we're not immediately seated when walking into a restaurant?
Oh my gosh. What is this coming from?
That sort of situation?
When have I like ever cared that much when we're not immediately sat down by a restaurant?
Never. No, but have you ever used them in like conversation or frustration?
I've used them, not like at someone.
Not at someone in French.
No.
Or in France, rather.
No.
Okay.
But like, it's like the way you'd say like some of the curse words here if you're frustrated about something or you drop something or like you tripped and fell, you know, those situations where one just slips out. Yeah, I do that.
Yeah, like French, a classic like, dang nabbit.
Yeah.
One of those.
Fiddlesticks situation. We
Something
can't curse
like
on the podcast, so that's why I won't get into it. But yeah, I know a few like French curse words and things, and I've like used them before.
At people.
Not at people, just like in general.
Well, something to work towards.
Yeah.
knowing that we like very recently recorded, there's probably not a whole bunch of updates other than the fact that you are feeling better. So I will ask for a highlight within the past 48, 72 hours.
Honestly, having a weekend where we really relaxed was just amazing. I haven't had like a full-on no plans, not doing anything weekend in months, I think. Maybe since the beginning of the year. We're always busy. Well, Christopher, I love you, but you're someone who loves to jam-pack your weekends full of activities and like friends and family and stuff. And sometimes I'm like, I just really want a weekend where I do absolutely nothing. And it was nice to have that. So, and just spend time together and cuddle with Professor. Yeah.
I will say that, so you were only gone for one weekend.
Yeah.
And the weekend that you were gone, that Sunday, I did not do anything. Well,
That's
like
nice.
I went to church.
Yeah.
I made a homemade pizza in a cast iron skillet. And that is it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was a very relaxing weekend. So,
Yeah.
something to work towards again.
Yeah. Hopefully.
My highlight was the Guardians walk-off.
Oh my gosh, the longest game known to man. Well, I talked about this last podcast too, about
It was wonderful.
the unnecessary length of certain sports.
That was a great, great game. It really was.
It was like extremely boring until the very end when we finally got a run.
How did we get that run?
It was a home run.
A home run?
Wasn't it a home run? I don't know. I wasn't paying attention. By the 15th inning, out of what should be 9 innings, I wasn't paying attention.
It was an infield single with 3 errors.
I have no idea what that means, Christopher. You
Don't
could,
you remember
could be
the
speaking
sequence?
French curse words to me, and I wouldn't
I need to
know.
learn
I'm just
those.
kidding.
No, it was a walk-off home run. You're right. But yeah, that was awesome. Like, it was actually really, really fun because we were watching it and, well, I was watching it. You were tuning in periodically. We were on the couch together, but it was on in front of you, but it was not on upstairs.
No,
And
I was on my phone.
Sometimes you would look up and you'd be like, my God, it's still going on.
Right?
And then it was actually a lot of fun because one of my close friends called me in, I don't know if it was the 11th or the 12th, but he was leaving because he had to go somewhere else. And he was like, you got to keep updating me. So it was a lot of fun, like catching up with him and also just, making it to the ALDS.
Oh, man.
And now we have more baseball, Catherine, starting tomorrow
I
night.
can't wait for the 20 innings that will be tomorrow night's game.
No, you know what? It's tough because we have a team that is very, very good at pitching, very, very good at defense, as you saw.
Mm-hmm.
Not a high-scoring team. The team that we are playing can just, rock the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see.
I also want to point out that Christopher is currently wearing his Stetson.
All day, every day.
He's in his pajamas, drinking a beer, and wearing his Stetson. And it makes no sense to me why this is happening.
I think it's a vibe, and I think that other people should get behind it. That's just me.
I don't know. Anyway.
I don't know.
Moving on.
You know what? When there is a sponsorship from Stetson,
I don't foresee that happening. I'll be honest.
have you sent them my Safari pics?
No.
Well, get on that, and the phone will be ringing. Yeah. Anything else you want to chat about?
Not really. Do we want to talk about an instance where you can wear your safari hat in a normal setting? Like during this podcast episode?
I was going to say, yeah. If other people are looking to record podcasts.
No, I'm saying the topic of this episode, the reason why you bought your Stetson, one of the reasons why you bought your Stetson in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. We can jump into it. So, gorilla trekking gets all the love. Mm-hmm. If someone is going to travel to Uganda, it is most likely to trek to see the mountain gorillas, right? So that begs the question, is trekking to see chimpanzees worth it? Is it going to be a letdown after mountain gorillas? Should you do it before mountain gorillas?
I will point out most people do it beforehand, which I did not realize ahead of time. Did I take the words out of your mouth there?
No, you didn't.
Oh, yeah. Because what I noticed when we were in, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on the name of Burundi? When we were in Burundi, there was a lot of people that had already done Queen Elizabeth National Park, had already done Kibale and the chimp trekking, and all of that stuff. And they were ending with this. And a lot of people also say that it's nice to start chimp trekking because it is significantly easier than gorilla trekking. Just the landscape and everything.
Yeah. If you don't need a warm-up, you can also do it the other way.
I'm glad we did it the way we did it.
I do too.
I'd almost rather get the hardest thing done first and then
I'm going to talk about
the easier
I'm
track.
going to talk about why I liked gorillas first and then chimps too. But going back to the rhetorical question, is chimp trekking worth it, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, even the Ugandan government, it's approximately a third of the cost to secure a permit for chimpanzee trekking as it is for mountain gorillas. Mm-hmm. Does that mean a third of the fun? So.
And I feel like a family of chimps is about 3 times the size of the gorilla family.
Yeah. So per chimp, they're about a third of the fun. Is your time in Eastern Africa better spent elsewhere as opposed to chimpanzee trekking? It's available in Uganda, like we mentioned, Rwanda, and also Tanzania. But is this something that you should add to your itinerary? We'll talk about that today. Let's start with thoughts prior to arrival. So we are moving from, in our case, Queen Elizabeth National Park to Kibale National Forest. Thoughts prior to arrival, either during that leg of the trip, before we even touch down in Africa. What were you thinking?
Well, in the planning process, originally you had come to me and said, I want to see the gorillas. And that was pretty much all I had to work with. And I was like, if we're going to fly for that long of a distance, we got to be there for more than it's got to be like a 2-week trip, to make that plane ride worth it. So when I was talking to, our safari planner at Go to Africa, when I was researching things to do in Uganda and Kenya, that's where this whole idea of trekking with chimps came about, just in our research. And originally I was thinking about doing it in Queen Elizabeth National Park and that gorge. And when I had talked even more with our safari planner, she had mentioned that they do have quite a few chimpanzees there, but it's harder. It's a harder chance, or it's less likelihood of actually seeing the families there. So she actually recommended doing Kibale National Park and doing the chimp trek there. So that's kind of how we came up with it. And honestly, I didn't really look too much into it because I had just heard that it was easier than gorilla trekking and that you pretty much wear the same things and kind of do similar things. And after all the research we'd done for gorilla trekking, I was like, all right, it's going to be pretty similar, probably a little bit easier. And the lodge that our safari our company booked us, looked really nice, and I was looking forward to that.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So my thoughts prior to arrival, boots on the ground, I'm thinking, here we go again. Right? I am wearing the exact same thing, like you said. I am carrying an amount of water for your comfort and your peace.
That's because I saw a TikTok. I don't know if it was Elise Myers. She's like a pretty big famous comedian TikToker who was like, there's always 2 people in every relationship. Someone whose constant goal is to stay hydrated and someone who is always dehydrated and never drinks enough water. And it gives me a lot of anxiety because anytime we go hiking, Christopher always he never brings enough water.
Let me ask you this. How much water do you drink a day?
If I'm going on a hike,
nope.
I would now you are, because I told you, because Christopher wants to run another ultra marathon, and if you were here in 2019, you've probably heard us talk about it on the podcast. And it was very hot outside, you got very dehydrated, and I was like, you have to prove to me because he wants to do another one. And I know it freaked me out after the first one. And I was like, look, if you want to do this, that's fine. But like, you need to prove to me you can hydrate properly.
I've been drinking a gallon of water a day for a month.
Good job.
Yeah.
I do that all the time.
Do you really?
Yeah.
A gallon?
I do.
128 fluid ounces.
Yes.
You are out of your mind.
Like every day, just like naturally
insane.
without thinking about it, because I'm always like, oh, I need to drink some water. I always have my water bottle on me.
What a nerd.
Like it's always something. I'm always drinking water.
Okay. So I am carrying a lot of stuff, right?
Okay.
A lot of water. Thoughts prior to arrival though, like one thing that kept sticking out to me was the story that chimps are more aggressive, right? I mean, gorillas don't eat meat. Chimpanzees will go after monkeys. Mm-hmm. They're just more, whether it's territorial or aggressive. They're not as big as gorillas, obviously. But
there's more of them.
But there's more of them, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, for whatever reason, like that kept sticking out in my mind. That was actually how I would kind of like calm family members' concerns that were like, oh my gosh, you really got to be careful about the gorillas. And I was like, actually, it's the chimps that you have to worry about.
Oh my gosh. I'm sure that made them significantly calmer.
Well, I mean, for the day. But yeah, so thoughts prior to arrival, I thought that we would probably see more. But that it was definitely, I mean, it was going to be different, right? So it was something that I was looking forward to. First impressions. You're on the ground. You see your first chimpanzee. What are you thinking?
Well, even just before that, it was a whirlwind. Because usually you kind of have like an introduction and some information about the chimpanzees. But
a briefing.
It was about to start storming. Or had started thundering and stuff, and our guide basically just like jumped in our car and was like, we better go now because, you know, if we don't get there in time, the chimps may climb up the trees because of the rain to get off the ground. And so we just kind of rushed into it, and it didn't take long to find the chimps, maybe 20 minutes or so of hiking. Not even. It really didn't take long. It's very flat compared to like going up and down mountains in windy impenetrable forest. So very quick to find them. And yeah, when I saw them, I mean, there was only a handful left on the ground. Most of them had moved up into the trees. And I think the first thing I noticed was just how upset they looked because it was raining. The pouty faces. But they were mostly just hanging out by the trees. It was the males that were on the ground, and a handful of them were still down there. And they do, like, the eye contact, I mean, they're our closest relative genetically of all animals. So, I mean, it was crazy getting to, you know, to look in their eyes and to see their reactions and all of that stuff. So that was really, really cool to see and to check out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a weird first impression.
Okay.
I had seen a chimpanzee before. I don't know if memory just failed me, but I had pictured them as being smaller than they actually were. Right?
That's a good point.
These are animals that can be between like 90 and 130 pounds. And when I saw my first one, I was like, is that the alpha? And they're like, no.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. And then like I'm looking around and I'm like, this is a well-fed tribe. Like it was just like they were larger than what I had remembered, but I was misremembering it. So that was pretty cool in and of itself. I am going to echo something that you had said, was that they were incredibly human-like. Mm-hmm. I mean, they really were. Like, we thought that there was like a very intimate and emotional connection eye to eye with the gorillas. The chimpanzees even more so. The word that you used was pouting. Mm-hmm. It was sprinkling. They don't have umbrellas. A little chilly. Right? Yeah. They don't have umbrellas. They don't have Stetsons on. So they don't have that natural stoppage to the rain. And they were on the ground, sitting on the ground, arms crossed. Like imagine like folding your arms, looking down, and just thinking like, oh, when is this rain gonna stop?
Right.
And that was the exact look that they had on their face. It was incredible. Mm-hmm. It really, really was.
Yeah. I mean, I would also say another first impression that I realized when we got there is that chimpanzees are not the only thing to see, the only primate in Kibale National Park. It's known as the primate capital of the world.
12 different species?
I want to say it's 13. 13 or 14. I think 3 or 4 of them are... No, it's 13. So 4 of them are nocturnal, and then 9 of them are you can see out and about during the day, including chimpanzees,
and I think
and different types
7.
of monkeys. Yes, we saw quite a few during our time, both at our lodge and in the park, as well as a wetlands tour that we took that we'll talk about later.
Yes. So, first impressions were pretty on point. Why don't you talk about logistics, and then we'll get into the fun stuff?
Okay. As if the logistics aren't fun.
I mean, this is the part of any sort of destination guide that I look forward to the most, but...
Okay. So logistics, how do you get there? We flew into Kasese, taking one of those tiny bush planes. I think we flew Aerolink. And that was arranged through Go to Africa, and their company on the ground that they work with is Africa Beyond Borders, but they basically booked all that for us, which was helpful. There's also a bus from Kampala that does the Fort Portal route that you can do, but for the most part, if you're going to be doing this trip, just because tourism, I don't know, as far as like logistics and things like that, it's just a lot easier to go with a safari company if you're going to be doing the gorilla trek and Queen Elizabeth National Park and chimp trekking. Just going ahead and book it through a company that's going to just sort of, they'll worry about the permits for everything, the national park fees, as well as your transportation, your housing, everything that you need to worry about. They'll take care of that for you. So Go to Africa was a great resource, and they sort of did all that for us. But we flew into Kasese, where our guide met us, and he drove us, I think it was about 2 hours drive from Kasese to Kibale National Park. And then as far as where to stay, we stayed at Turacao Treetops Lodge, which was absolutely lovely. We walked in seeing monkeys right away.
Gorgeous. Mm-hmm. Gorgeous scenery. Yeah,
the lodge is open air. They light a fire at night. There's like a little fireplace. It's all cozy. There's games. That was our first place. We found some Ugandan craft beer, the Banange beer, which was delicious. They had a pool. And then also you get your own private like bungalow situation that looks like it's in the treetops or feels like it because you have a huge balcony you can sit out on at the back of your little villa, and it just feels like you're right in the trees. And we also saw plenty of monkeys there too. I think that's where we saw red colobus monkeys and black and white colobus monkeys.
That's also where we heard them playing on the top of our bungalow.
Yeah. So really beautiful, and we had a very spacious room, and it was very lovely and state-of-the-art looking, and
gorgeous.
It was nice. Yeah.
Really was.
And then as far as when to visit, dry season's going to be your best bet for the chimps, just so you can see more, as they tend to hide a little bit. When it's cold and chilly, they'll go up in the trees, as well as the other primates. So June through September and December through February is a better time to visit for the dry season.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So before we get into the actual like physical activity of chimp trekking, you had mentioned another area that we visited that was very close, called the Bogoti Wetlands. Mm-hmm. We did not see chimpanzees in the Bogoti Wetlands, but they will frequent the area
for hunting, sadly.
Yes. What did you think about the tour?
I'm actually really glad we did that because we saw quite a few primates in that area, and we had a local guide who talked to us about like the local farms in the area, and the conservation that they're doing through the wetlands and stuff like that. But yeah, he was really great at pointing out a ton of different wildlife, including turacao. Are those the birds?
Yes,
there were these beautiful birds called turacao. There we saw red colobus, black and white colobus. What else did we see?
We saw gigantic insects.
Oh, and gigantic spiders. But what other monkeys did we see?
I believe those were the only two on the tour. We saw a lot of them driving in.
Yes, baboons,
Yeah.
different types of monkeys and stuff too that we got to see, which was fun.
Yeah. I agree. I enjoyed the Bogoti Wetlands tour. It was more so of just, this is something that I always admire about people who live like adjacent to a wild area, whether it's like a national park here where there's like maybe like grizzly or moose or what have you. We don't get as much of that in Northeast Ohio here. But he was talking about how the community kind of seamlessly interacts with the wildlife, right? Like there's the the wildlife wants the crops. The farmers don't want the wildlife to have the crops. So there is that yin and yang there. It was very interesting. Just, from both a wildlife perspective as well as a cultural perspective. If you're in the area, I would recommend taking the tour. It was maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours.
Yeah, we did it in the morning after breakfast. On the day we did the chimp trek. So
yeah,
there's also the option to sign up for habituation of chimps, which is a lot harder to get because we had talked about that with our safari planner. But we only had a couple of days. We sort of flew into Kibale. Then we had the day where we did the chimp trek. And then the next day we left to go to Kenya. So
yeah,
really, you only need a couple days there, especially if your main focus is the chimp trek. And this is something you could do in the morning and then in the afternoon go on the chimp trek. Or vice versa. Do the chimp trek in the morning and then that in the afternoon. Because you can do either morning or afternoon with the chimp trek since it's a half day. Versus gorilla trekking, which you pretty much block the whole day off for.
Yeah. So let's talk about packing for the chimpanzee trek. I wrote down identical as gorilla. Right? So if you have not listened to our gorilla trekking episode number 185, go ahead and do that. But what I wore was hiking boots, long hiking socks, thick pants, a long sleeve shirt, a raincoat because it was raining. Even if it's not raining, go ahead and pack one. A hat. And then we brought the gloves, but we didn't necessarily need the gloves. We
not
talked
as much stinging nettle.
I was just going to say, we talked about the prevalence of stinging nettle in Bawindi. That was not as common in Kibale. And then, of course, just, as much water as
bring
as
a good amount of water, what you think you'll need for a 2 to 3 hour potential. We were out there for probably
2 hours.
2 to 3 hours. Yeah. So bring enough for that. And then some sunscreen and, put on a little bug repellent beforehand. And you should be pretty good to go.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So let's talk about when you
and your
actually...
camera, obviously. Sorry.
Yeah. When you actually make contact, not physical contact, but like you find the chimpanzees. The thing that really struck me was that how much more active chimpanzee trekking was than gorilla trekking once you found them. So gorilla trekking, we were really in somewhat of a smaller area, right? Like they would move a little bit, we would move a little bit. The chimpanzees, at least the family that we tracked, which was around 120 members of this family. We did not see all of them. We probably got to witness maybe 10. But
they also cover a massive area of land, so you're not going to see all 120 something members of the family.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they were spread out, right? We were moving a lot to see different chimpanzees. It's the same sort of situation where you have an armed person from the Ugandan Wildlife Authority. You do not have all of the porters. Our group was not as big. It's just a smaller, more intimate setting, at least when we went. But yeah, what did you think when we actually like made contact and we were starting to walk around and looking at all of the different chimpanzees?
Well, at first I was nervous that they were all going to go up in the trees and we weren't going to see anything because it was raining. And there were actually a couple of groups that had canceled their tour. because it was raining and they'd heard that chimps can, they'll climb up in the trees and you can't really see them once they get above the canopy. And our guide, she was fantastic. And she was like, let's go because wildlife is wild. And she was like, there will still probably be some on the ground. This doesn't look like it's going to be a heavy rainstorm. Like whenever it stops, you'll start slowly seeing them to get on the ground. And that's exactly what happened. We saw maybe 3 or 4 on the ground at first. They quickly went up in the trees except one. And then once it started to, cease raining and stuff, you saw a lot more of the chimps slowly coming back down on the ground and interacting and stuff a little bit more. So that was really cool to see. They mostly just kind of hung out around the trees that they were up. But yeah, it was neat. We would definitely walk around quite a bit to see different chimps in different areas. Because it's not like they were walking away too much. Only a couple of them sort of did, and we followed them. But for the most part, they kind of stood still. But that was also because
seeking shelter. Yeah,
time of day, weather, etc. There are also times that I've heard that they're very active, especially after like in the morning or something. So that can vary based on weather, when they've eaten, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the big lesson here, like you said, is that wildlife is wild, right? You're not going to be able to predict it. So go for it. You already paid the money to see them, right?
Well, I will point out it was $300 a person for the chimp trek.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's $300 per person for the permit for your chimp trek, right? And if you go out and you don't find any chimps because of the weather or something like that, they will allow you to rebook. If you just cancel because of the weather and you don't go out, if you don't even try to see the chimps, they will not refund you. So if you cancel, that's kind of it.
That's on you.
And there were people that after a while, I guess the guides had phoned in and said like, hey, there are chimps on the ground if you guys want to come out. And a couple of tour groups did end up showing up later. But for a while, it was just the 2 of us and our guide.
Yeah.
With the chimps. And we got to stay a little bit longer because we had to kind of stay there while the other tour groups were trying to come in and to find us and stuff or to find the chimps. So that was really cool to spend that extra time there.
It was really neat.
Yeah.
The other thing that was really neat is, I mean, like you said, we do share a greater percentage of our DNA with chimps than we do with gorillas. There was the moment when they were up in the trees and then the alpha that we got to see started sending them down. And it was because they had heard a rival family or another family kind of getting a little too close to their territory, which was really cool to see because our guide just did an excellent job narrating it and like really heightening the experience because she was saying, okay, look, the alpha is now telling some of the more senior members to get down on the ground to spread out, right? Because they want to see how many chimps are coming towards them to see if they need to bring in reinforcements, to see like how this whole territorial thing is going to play out. It was really cool just to kind of witness all of this in real time. I'm incredibly thankful that we did this and that we went out despite the rain.
Yeah.
Because that was a very unique experience to see.
Yeah. Well, and it also scared me too because I guess the alpha had made a noise, like a screeching noise, and then all of the like chimps in the trees did that to scare off this like rival family.
Yeah.
And it terrified me at first because it's very loud, and I'm like, okay, well, there's a lot more of them than there are of us. And even our guide laughed at me because she was like, oh no, like they like do not care that you guys are here because they're habituated, they're used to human presence. It's just another chimp family nearby, and that's sort of when the alpha started sending like the chimps down, the other chimps, and we like followed them around for a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was more concerned with which side I was going to pick.
Okay.
You know? But yeah, really, really neat experience.
I will say, I think they're a little less strict with the 1 hour time mark with the chimps than they are with the gorillas. The gorillas, it's 1 hour and you're gone. Like you do not stay past that hour. That you're allotted to see them. With the chimps, it's a little different. I think it's because there are a couple of groups a day that kind of go out, and there are sometimes just groups that sort of come in and out different areas. I don't really know.
I will also say that I think it somewhat has to do with the fact that trackers aren't staying with them all the time, like they did with the mountain gorillas. So like you mentioned, we had to stay out there so that other people could find where they were.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I definitely had a more relaxed feeling with the time constraint there. Another really cool thing was on our drive back to the visitor center, you get a certificate of completion, like you do for the mountain gorillas. But on the drive back, we got to see other members of the family that were up in a tree with babies.
Yes, which was awesome. So yeah, we had spotted them afterward, and that was really cool to see.
Yes,
in the trees.
But yeah, overall, just an incredible experience. Anything else that you want to say before kind of the wrap-up questions?
Yeah, I mean, other than the fact that, like, we were kind of rushed having to get out there and stuff. I mean, they do a briefing and everything, but it's not usually as rushed of experience to get out to see the chimps because of the rain. They did it that way. But if it's nice weather, there's also the chance to see other primates in that forest because, again, Kibale National Park is the primate capital of the world, and other little animals and critters and things. So that's really cool that you can do that as well. So don't just think it's only going to be the chimps. Like, you could also see other monkeys and primates during that.
Great point.
Yeah.
All of that being said, on a return trip to Eastern Africa, would you make time to go back and do chimpanzee trekking in Kibale?
It's tough because we didn't really get to see like the babies playing on the ground. Like with the gorilla trek, we kind of got the whole family, or not. We didn't see every single member, but like you saw the adults chilling, moving around, doing their thing, eating, and you saw the babies playing around and having a lot of fun on the ground. And we didn't really get that experience with chimp trekking, just mostly because of the weather. Usually the mothers are sort of the first up in the trees with the babies to keep them warm and all of that stuff. So we didn't really get to experience like the whole family sort of being on the ground, because I've heard that that's also a lot of fun when they're all kind of down and playing and doing things like that. So I almost feel like I would like to go back to experience that. But if I didn't, I think I would be okay because I've had that experience. Like I've had the experience of seeing the chimpanzees.
Yeah, I know what you mean. When I asked this question about mountain gorillas, I was like 100%. There was just something about it that was amazing. And this was absolutely incredible in its own part. If I could guarantee nice weather, I would do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
But knowing that they were, it was, I mean, like we said, wild is wild, right?
Yeah.
And you're in a rainforest.
Yeah.
So
even though it's the dry season, it could rain at any time.
Yes. Yeah. I will say though that I do think that I would go back. I think that if we were in the area again, I would definitely want to do. Well, actually, I'm going to amend my answer. I would do chimpanzee trekking again. I don't necessarily know if I would go out of my way to do it in Kibale again. I'll put it that way. Okay. Because there's something about that connection. There really is. Just like, I mean, we said it was raining. We said that they were sitting on the ground, arms folded. And yeah, I mean, no one wants to get caught in the rain. And there was just kind of that shared sorrow of, yeah, man, like this sucks. And you could feel that though. Like you could see the emotion on their faces. I would absolutely do chimpanzee trekking again. But I will say that now that I have experienced it in Kibale, I wouldn't necessarily like go out of my way to do it in Kibale again. I feel like the experience could be different elsewhere. But it is absolutely not. It's like 1A and 1B for primate trekking for me with the gorillas. It's not an afterthought. It's a must do if you're going to do that.
Yeah, and we highly recommend going to Kibale if you've never been to Uganda. If you've never chimp trekked, I mean, I feel like that's probably one of the best places to go.
Yeah, 100%.
Just a vast amount of chimpanzees, the tons and tons of other primates that you can see. So highly, highly recommend visiting Kibale National Park. Do you have anything else to add?
Nothing.
All right. Well, that wraps it up. Let us know your thoughts. Have you guys been chimp tracking? Would you like to go? You can always reach out to us on Twitter via WW Honeymoon, Instagram at Worldwide Honeymoon, or email cat@worldwidehoneymoon.com. But thank you guys so much for tuning in.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to rate and review our podcast. It takes less than a few minutes and really helps other people find us. Also, if you're enjoying this awesome free information on both the blog and podcast, when you're booking your next trip, head over to worldwidehoneymoon.com/resources and use the links provided. We earn a small commission at no cost to you when you book through these links, and these are all brands and companies we know, love, and use, like Skyscanner for finding the best flight prices, World Nomads for the best travel insurance, TripAdvisor for hotel bookings and reviews, and even Amazon for all of your travel purchases.
Thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Wherever you are, wherever you go, remember to make every day a worldwide honeymoon.